The background to this workshop briefly is that many branches of the university, focusing on international affairs and student life, have recognized that Stanford does a fine job of preparing you academically for an overseas experiences. We offer courses on the part of the world that you may be visiting, that we might offer courses on public health if that's your field. We offer courses on research methodology. We have very strong area studies programs which you're encouraged to visit if you haven't done so. So on the academic side, we do a good job. We also, it turns out, do a terrific job of offering you money to go and do your thing, research or service or whatever. Probably better than any other college or university around. What we do not do so well, and hence the reason for this workshop, is to get you to think about some of the practical aspects of arriving to another place, of living, often by your own, of dealing with feelings often of loneliness, of cultural isolation, dealing with situations which might be on the negative or bad side. We'll talk a lot about your positive anticipations, which you all have, but we'll also spend a fair amount of time talking about things that aren't so pleasant to consider because they might occur to you, and you want to spend time thinking now about them rather than having to make it up on the spot if something not so pleasant happens to you. In that sense, it's worthwhile thinking of this workshop as an insurance policy. When you take out insurance, you are not predicting that certain bad things are going to happen, but you are acknowledging that they might. And you're taking advanced preparation to act appropriately if it turns out that they do. With the checklists we provide you in hand and your carefully considered responses to many issues you may not have thought about before you came in this afternoon, we think you will be in the best position to have the fine summer experience that you anticipate. The first panel, which I will moderate, consists of Stanford students, undergraduates, who were abroad last summer. They'll respond from their own experience to questions that I will pose, and I'll offer some additional ones to sort of keep adding on to the mix of things that you might want to think about. And then it will be over to you briefly for about 5 minutes in most of these sessions to talk about your responses to what you've heard, but also your own answers to the question that I've posed of the panel. The second panel will feature 4 speakers calling on their professional experience to address recurring issues that students going overseas experience. And those speakers will refer you to additional information and contacts online, et cetera. You'll have plenty to take away with you. Now, let's get started. I'll ask members of the panel briefly to introduce themselves with their name, the country they were visiting, and their major. Diane.
My name is Diane Boxall. I am a senior in political science. I went to St. Lucia in the Caribbean to discuss education with stakeholders on the island and did a 2-week project in which there were presentations, workshop, and interviews. I also went because I wanted to further my academic interests and gather data for my honors thesis, and I wanted to see if this was the kind of work I might want to do later in my life.
My name's Kareem Alston. I'm an African and African American Studies major. I went to Cape Town, South Africa after the winter BOSP abroad program to study local hip hop culture.
My name is Morgan Abbott. I'm a senior majoring in environmental engineering and minoring in African studies. And I went to Uganda over the summer to study wastewater reuse amongst farmers in cities. I was going as a research assistant for a PhD student and also to do some of my own research for an honors thesis.
My name is Louise Liu. I'm a hum bio major, or human biology major, and my concentration is epidemiology of infectious disease. I was in rural Guizhou, China, to conduct research for my honors thesis. There's a huge public health problem there. So 40% of kids have intestinal worms. So I was going there to ask, look at the factors like contributing to this high prevalence.
Hi, my name is Matthew Colford. I'm a senior in political science in the research honors track. I spent the summer in Senegal and Burkina Faso doing research for my honors thesis on the determinants of displacement among civilians in civil war.
I'm Nicole Fullman. I'm a junior now in anthropology, and last summer I went to Argentina to do research related to my honors thesis. I was focusing on farmers' decision makings in a pretty changing agricultural environment.
It turns out that all the students here have gone overseas to do research. Many of you I know are in a service track, which is somewhat different. But you'll note that when you do service, you'll be researchers yourself, asking questions, try to make sense of the environment. And you'll also find out from the panelists that all their, quote, researchers, many of them have a service component to the work that they do. So there's quite a bit of overlap between a research and a service project, and what they say, I'm sure, will be helpful to everyone. Let's start with the basic question. Why did each of you go out to do your project? What was your principal motivation?
I would say my principal motivation was to gather data for the honors thesis, but it was also to find out if I would work well as a consultant in that part of the world once I am finished with my education. So it afforded me two different kinds of opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I was really excited when I went there before. I study a lot with the Institute for Diversity in the Arts, and the big professors who do that are hip-hop scholars. They write books about like how hip-hop has impacted language and identity internationally. And then when I went to Cape Town, I found out that there was just like a very rich history and like local proliferation of hip-hop in a way that we don't really practice it and see it in the United States. So I wanted to go back to study that, like look at how it impacts race, identity, and like the post-apartheid environment in ways that other things don't. And it was awesome. It was very empowering, and also as an African American, I really had connected to, going to like a country in Africa. You don't really, there's like this romanticization of what it is, or like how it's supposed to relate to your identity. And I kind of wanted to discover that for myself. So those were the main reasons I went.
Like Diane, I was there to do honors thesis research, but I was also excited just for the chance to go abroad. I had done a summer of research on campus and taken classes that were really related to the topic I was studying in Uganda, but being there was just a whole different experience. And I think over the course of this panel, you'll hear about different ways that life abroad, especially kind of these short-term research or service internships abroad, can be so different from anything you would experience at home. So I was really excited for those exposures.
So I've been working on public health research for a couple of years now at Stanford, and right now I'm working with this group at the Freeman Spogli Institute, and they were doing a deworming intervention in China. So when I learned that there's this huge public health problem there, I really wanted to see how I could contribute. And the problem is that there's this huge public health problem, but no one knows why it exists, because deworming treatment costs less than like 2 cents per pill, like per child per year. So there's this like huge barrier of knowledge to like how you can improve this, and the only way you can really investigate it is to like be there on the ground and talk to people in the villages and see like why their kids are having this high rate of infections, why they're not being treated. So that was my motivation. This is something that I like couldn't have done by just Googling or researching. I had to be like abroad and there in the villages. So.
I wanted to make some sort of an original contribution to the political science literature on Civil War and ask questions that previously researchers hadn't asked. And I was originally going to go to Northern Ireland to study the IRA, and then my thesis advisor, who's an Africanist, said, why don't you study a conflict that has had very little academic research conducted on it? And so that's why I chose West Africa.
I was really excited to practice using like ethnographic research methods and just learn how to do good interviews and write about my experience, since I was going to try to use that to do research this upcoming summer. I was also really excited to use my language skills that I'd learned from studying abroad in Spain the time before, so just navigating in another country in a completely immersive environment using Spanish. And then on a more personal level, I was just really excited to travel to Argentina specifically, just because from what I'd seen of the country and what I'd learned about it, I saw a lot of similarities to home. I'm from Iowa, and so I was excited to be able to relate to people who kind of lived in a similar way, completely on a different part of the world.
Thanks. A couple of other motivations I've heard from students. One, I want to go overseas to learn about myself, not just other people, precisely because there will be unexpected circumstances, a different culture, experiences including loneliness that I haven't had before. I'll find out what I'm made of, how I will respond to these kinds of situations, often unexpectedly to myself. Another motivation, frankly, I want to pad my CV. The jobs are tough out there, whether getting to graduate school or getting a job in the, quote, real world. And if I've had this experience, it will look good on my CV. And that's a perfectly honest, self-interested answer. So let's give about 5 minutes to you and your tables to talk a little bit about what your motivations are, to think a little bit about why you want to do your project. And then the bell in 5 minutes, Jeff's famous bell, is going to ring. You're on.